12-point advantage, 2 minutes to go, third quarter. George, fancy handles, jump shots on the...
Just 6 out of 21, 28% of the game. As George dances.
Yes, they do.
And they're not getting a stop there.
And the Thunder, down 1, have a timeout. They're not going to use it. George with 5. George drives over Gobert. It's good with 8.
Well, Paul George rips him and then looks at the Laker bench. Stevenson all over George. Finally draws the foul. Shot's good and then one.
Nobody there to block the shot for the Thunder. C.J. McCollum so dangerous on the offensive end. George, a series of moves. Oh, my!
Westbrook had made 13 of 16 free throws his last 2 games coming into tonight. Went 1 of 2 on that last trip. George, man, just hangs for...
George crosses. George flips it in.
Here's George, puts it on the floor, gets past 2 guys, stuffs it up.
George twirls, and that's
George, beautiful dribble, drives the paint, hangs, and gets the bounce.
Cabarrot and Schroeder on the floor for the Thunder, who have 9 to shoot. George banks it in.
down to the corner. George goes through his legs, now spins, fades, shot, banks in. George in the corner, got by, goes to the rim, throws it down.
Stanley trying to overplay Paul George. George gets by him for a jam.
I felt like a lot of young fans, you know, they need to see some of the names on that list.
Yeah.
Paul Malone's terrific scorer.
Another deflection and another turnover. Boy, how tough is it to thread passes against this Thunder defense? George, that is an and one continuing.
4 of his last 5 games, 30 or more points. George drives and got it. He's got a
Had it picked out of his hands by Warren. George on the pull-up. Got the roll. 39-10 third quarter to dominate the Clippers in the second.
I get it. Our job is to wonder about where he's going to be, but for this particular instance, this is just about respect for a teammate.
Luke to the paint. His pass back outside, picked off by Paul George. George with a drive and a scoop and a score.
That was a nice move. Took a little contact as well.
How about Paul George? Speaking of contact, and on the floor for Billy Donovan. Westbrook kicks it out to George in the corner. Defender lost his balance. George knocks it down.
Got to get stops.
Well, someone's got to help Joe.
Paul George, again the jumper.
It's isolation. Listen. Sixers back up by 2. George with the step back 3. Got it! George 3 of 8 from the field here in the first quarter. Kyrie taking on the defensive challenge. Paul George just stepped.
Adams plays quarterback. Throws it to George. Sends it. Paul George.
Westbrook to George. 17 first half points.
George picked up on a split spine. Capella goes right at him. And Thompson. Paul.
90 seconds to go in the game. ISO at the elbow, working on the bounce. Paul George over Barnes, and good.
Westbrook accelerating. George gets around Dinwiddie, corkscrews in.
Ferguson had that 3-point shot blocked. George going to have to make a move here with the shot clock winding down. Tough step back 3, high arching. Feels like the
Great player. A great kid out of Seattle.
He came into the league when you were still playing.
Absolutely. George is just seeing a fit for the role.
He did not.
Yes,
that is not true.
But it was lost out because he obviously had a job and they were going to film during the winter.
George will account.
He lit up the Thunder last year, averaging 28 per game. Portland swept the Thunder. In fact, as George nails a 3. George, they double him on the catch. Timer at 5. Against Brogdon, puts it up, hits it!
I just want to win. I'm happy to come off the bench. Oh, maybe happy is a strong word, but he was willing. He was willing. As George gets it, and he'll...
Here's George for a three. It's good.
Is it bunched up? 5.5 games separate teams 1 through 8. George with 2 to fire. Nice shot.
And James Johnson brings it down. And Westbrook with the steal. Paul George for 3. Yes.
Plenty of time left. 6:45 remaining. George feeling it. Paul George!
A little turnaround shot, no good. George spins and floats it up and in. George takes it strong, source.
They are, and also his length, his ability to offensive rebound.
What a block by Nerlens Noel on Winslow. Boy, Noel has found his niche.
Paul George.
Other than Griffin. As you see George trying to turn the corner, got to the rim, Drummond.
Getting to the basket on really 2 defenders.
Jump stop, no. George on the second.
Stay there and don't move until the shot actually hits the rim. And he might not think it doesn't mean.
Paul George may have gotten away with a walk. Offensive rebound in the... George, played by Hayward. George again.
Taking a possession at a time to try and win those.
He's caught on Paul George. Westbrook against Brown. George turns, guns, gets it.
Here comes George, weaving his way into a pump fake and an easy score.
Highest percentage 3 in the game. George steps into the 3. Nothing but.
No, make that, yeah, it's 4th. George. No, 6 rebounds. I'm sorry. There's George. Oh, that's going to count.
He's got 8 so far in this first half. Leaves it up to George. Thought about that 3. Instead, spins on Arcidiacono.
That's the way I'm going to play this. Unless it's a 3 like that. And again, you got
that historical run.
George dances.
You got to think Paul George has to get a touch at some point, and he does. The 3 ball quickly. Got it! And one!
George on the step back. Continues to feel it. Contact, no call. There's Paul George. Stampedes ahead. Wants the 3. Got the 3.
The value of the 3 and the restricted area 2s for Houston.
George splash. Adams outlets to Paul George. Drills the 3.
Starting at 0-3 for the first time in their brief history here in Oklahoma City since the move from Seattle.
Westbrook veers left. George trying to turn the corner, got to the rim, lays it up and in. In his career, the last couple of years, battling some injuries. There's Paul George. For a massive first half, he's been so impactful here. And now Paul George gets in.
I'm more impressed with that 24 assists on 30 made field goals. Paul George all the way to the rim.
Hey, you take it and you run. Jeremy Lamb, there's a turnover. Good pressure on the ball. Paul George waits, hesitates to the rim and goes up.
That Buddy Hield, boy, he ran that play to perfection.
Yes, he did.
George banks it home, 96.
For what he brings to the table every night. Paul George against Korver. Goes inside, reversed it easily.
Now 9 of 30 from 3. All corner 3s for Favors this year.
Paul George, high floater.
What his team must do to get fouled on drive to the basket. George shoots over the top of Isaac. When you're scrambling, you got to be able to scramble in a way where you're not giving up that dunk. And back-to-back possessions.
George screening some
big guy on the run like that.
No, absolutely not. Let him get a little bit below. Look, foul line down this guy. Who can stop this guy in this league?
Paul George with a lot of sauce.
There's a trunk, and they make the call. George. Oh, my goodness. Paul.
Now Westbrook. Had it blocked, I believe, by Favors, but there's Steven Adams saving it from going out of bounds. George. Boy, he is on fire.
You know George is going to try to start to take over, and he scores there.
George over Holiday. It's good, and he's in double.
Just let him play for a minute. Probably taking advantage of that too.
Paul George has the small Kemba Walker on him, and scores right on top.
George now played by Looney, got the step and scores.
Perfect move.
George off the fake. Oh, here.
You know I love you, and I'm going to have a little fun with you. I just saw that. I'm sorry.
And you throw it down with some force. Emphatically. Paul George.
That's where you got to throw the ball out. He was going for the home run. 113-106. Paul George. Big shot. 113.
He's 13th in the rebounding department in the entire league. Paul George, they're going to count it.
Bryant Moutier would not be denied that time. George shaking up Cornette.
And knocks down the jumper.
Comments with us earlier when he talked about how he slowed down just a little bit this year, not getting caught up in Russell Westbrook's pace.
George for three.
Shot clock at 5 for the Thunder. George. It's good.
By the OKC Thunder. Here they come up by 4. George lowers the shoulder, takes the bump, and draws the foul. And
Boston continues to beat them off the dribble and get great looks at the rim.
Paul George with the step back made a little bit of space. Just
Schroeder's going to get out of the way to give George one side of the floor to work against Cleveland and hits.
And a big reason why is the man with the basketball who just cannot be slowed down. There is no...
And off to Westbrook, who's averaging 11 assists, 11 rebounds, and nearly 22 points a game.
What I mentioned, Jack Sigma with 32 points to lead the way.
Reverse pivot, Marv. Jack Sigma.
They had to hoist that with about 4 on the timer. It must have hit the rim because the shot clock reset. But an empty possession. Now comes Paul George with a pull-up, and it's good.
The Thunder certainly going to have to keep an eye on him defensively. Paul George guarded by Mike Scott. Little shimmy.
If you're Denver's point guard, shoot the basketball. You're going to have an advantage at the rim for the rebound.
And if you're Paul George, take it to the...
Some people aren't aware of that rule, though. Is Paul George not...
He's up with another steal. He leads the NBA in total steals. 10-point Thunder lead. George knifing down the lane. Oh, the nifty move on the left.
There's definitely probably a bottle involved, but I think it might have been a New York night.
Count it. And you always hit the guy that's open no matter who it is.
George, what a shot.
To Paul George, Westbrook spreads the floor. George slaps away the hand of O'Neal. And
Westbrook directs traffic. Bogdanovich guarding George. He's hit 5 threes tonight and hits his 6th.
Ferguson stays in the game. Meanwhile, OKC's missed their last 10 shots, and that streak ends as Westbrook leads the NBA in assists. Harden is 5th in the NBA as George count it and the foul.
Still looking for that first bucket. 0 for 4 from the field. George, quick release for 3.
Just simply make plays.
George with the blow by. And get...
We'll see how Coach Koufos does on Adams now. And there's Paul George. That's
good defensive team, but adding Moutier and Knox, you suffer a little bit on the defensive end. Paul George, beautiful.
And Durant goes right at him and loses the ball. George to the rim and the stuff.
Putting the Thunder in transition, more disruption on the offensive end.
How about Paul George? All of it.
Westbrook up top to Paul George. George driving, shooting, and scoring.
Did you ever get an alley-oop when you were playing?
Yeah.
And good job by Steven Adams. I'm sorry, Brian. Just good job by Steven Adams, just challenging that shot.
Step back 3, Paul George, 2nd.
For the Thunder, this is game 1 of a 4-game road trip. They'll go to Portland, the Clippers, and the Jazz on this trip.
The most points that
Oklahoma City's allowed in any quarter this year. Here's George for three. It's good with a second and a half.
There, putting pressure on the defender and the rim. Nice by Paul George.
That's 25.
George fires up to 2.
George got off to such a hot start in that first quarter. Maybe
he's found a home there in San Antonio. Not like he didn't have one before, but he's playing so much better than he has.
There's George knocking it down.
Plenty of time on the shot clock. George, tough finish.
Paul George matched up against a much smaller Rubio. Gonna try to post him up. Now faces up and swishes that one home. A 7-0 run. Almost midway through quarter number 3. George trying to turn the corner on Sexton and does. Thunder can come up with possible 4, maybe a 5-point possession here. George's got 5 personal fouls. Goes to the rim. Backs it home.
Doug McDermott played half of the year in Oklahoma City. And now George again.
He feels it.
Holiday goes right at Grant. Not an easy task. And the Thunder defensive player, Jeremy Grant, forced that miss. George steps into the 3. 2 in a row.
In all the easy point categories, points off turnovers, points in the paint, fast break, second chance points. Tonight, San Antonio is
100 block seasons in franchise history, second only to Alonzo Mourning, who had over 100 blocks 8 times in his NBA.
And doing a lot of that heavy lifting and finding a guy who he's found over 60% of his assists is Steven Adams.
But that's smooth. George for 3.
You know what it's going to be. I mean, he is tremendous in so many areas.
George going to work on the rookie. He's been putting up big numbers here in the first 5 games of the year for Phoenix. George with the step back, knocks it down.
Lead is back up to 8. George against Tatum. Straightaway 3.
Whoa.
Wet.
Utility by Sonia.
George, little shake and bake, nails the 3-pointer as he
2013. He's from New Zealand and played a year collegiately in the States at Pitt. And that is 4 points on that trip down.
He had such a good preseason that he basically worked his way into the rotation. As George, despite the hand,
And somehow is still walking around with one shoe. Paul George hits a 3. George.
I know when you played with Peja Stojakovic, he called that a Serbian layup from that distance.
Absolutely. Flamethrower right there.
Paul George, 19.
Come on, I can do that if I did that in my church league, I'd average about 50 a game.
boy, he just muscled his way.
He said we're bobbling balls, not going up strong. And then third, guard the 3-line better. He said James Harden and the step-back threes they can deal with, but we've got to defend the other threes better than...
Doesn't go. Rebounded by Westbrook. Loops it ahead. George forcing the action for 2.
Westbrook to Schroeder.
George, I don't know about you, but I think I see 6 Thunder defenders out there.
They got too many men on the floor, maybe.
George feeling it for 3. Got it!
O'Neal drives, can't get it over Adams. George pulls up for 3, buries it, 8 straight points.
Paul George knocks down.
Crawford wanted the 3 and left it short. George the rebound. A little bit of time here for the Thunder as he will launch it from half court and it goes.
One of those rare back-to-the-basket players. Nice fadeaway.
Aldridge with 20 and in the other.
Levine on the move, knocked away and stolen. Weaving is Paul George. He lost Lowry, fires and scores.
Forcing another miss by the T-Wolves.
Right now the energy level is picking up for the Thunder.
George got to the lane.
Williams is on the All-Star Paul George. Well, he's not on him anymore. The basket is good. He's got 32.
You're going to need that because you got to be able to stop the basketball.
So a lot of work to be done. How about Paul George? Oh, he split the double team.